The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive. Go to leader.blainebartlett.com/toolkit discovery. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett, and the soul of business. I want to disabuse people who are first-time listeners or kind of new to the show. I'm not talking about soul in a religious sense. I'm talking about soul in the way that the ancient Greeks would have talked about it. Aristotle in particular mentioned the soul as being that element, and he used the word elements here, that gives, that allows for the full expression of anything. It's that unseen thing that gets expressed in form. So in that sense, a tree has a soul. I mean, you can look at it that way. And again, I'm not talking about this in a religious or any kind of bifurcated way, non-duality. It's just everything has a soul. I mean, a rock expresses itself in a unique way, and it is a full expression of that rock. So the rockedness has a unique quality to it. Business has a unique soul. Every business has a unique soul. And part of that is influenced by just the nature of the human beings that populate these businesses that we're continuously encountering every day. So at that level and in that context, there's also, for me, a spiritual component to the way that we conduct our living, not just conduct our life, but conduct our living on this planet. And Max Planck famously said at one point in time, the father of quantum physics, that we can get behind anything, but we can't seem to get behind consciousness. There's that. Everything is consciousness. I'm going to use the word consciousness and spirituality, or spirit and soul, almost interchangeably here. There's this enlivening force that sets things up to be expressed, and when they get tamped down, when there's a cap that's put on that enlivening force, we end up with some of the corruption that we see because life doesn't have a way to fully express itself. And I mean corruption, not necessarily monetarily, but corruption. We corrupt the expression of the soul. We corrupt the expression of what's possible. So that's one of the reasons that I'm very excited, with that little bit of a preamble here, to have Mark Silver as my guest today. Mark has just launched a new book. It's called Heart-Centered Business: Healing from Toxic Business Culture So Your Small Business Can Thrive. One of the taglines that I was really struck by when his publicist sent over the invitation to have him on the show was something that really, really is central to my philosophy about business. And that little phrase here, every act of business can be an act of love. Now, as you're listening, I want you to just pause and think about that for a minute. Every act of business, and think of all the myriad acts that businesses conduct day in and day out, can be an act of love. And what might be the consequence if that were, in fact, the way that business was operating on the planet today? So, without further ado, I want to just, welcome Mark to the show. And we're going to do a deep dive on the book, obviously, but I also want to just kind of have a conversation with him about how he came to, this kind of epiphany, if you will. And we'll see what transpires. So, welcome to the show, folks, as listeners, and welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful context and environment you set up with all of that. I'm really touched, and it was a special thing to have you spend so much time with that phrase, because I mean, I've been living with it for years and years and years, but when was the last time I sat with it that deeply, because it's the mirror. And so I just really appreciated that moment. Thank you.
Well, you got a fairly eclectic background. You were EMT in San Francisco at one point. I mean, you're living on a relatively large farm right now, doing some sustainably farming, and for the family and for the neighborhood. I mean, there's a lot of different varieties to the stuff that you're doing here. You are a serial entrepreneur. You've run a number of different businesses. You turned around a magazine. I mean, just all kinds of things that you kind of go, wow, okay, entrepreneur. Not one business that I spent 50 years in. It's kind of like, there's possibility, there's an opening here. Where did you come to kind of, for me, the realization that the purpose of business is to enliven those that come in contact with my business?
It's a really beautiful question. And I think like many things, there's not just one moment, right? It's like a growing realization, emergent, as they say in permaculture and regenerative agriculture. It's an emergent realization of how things grow. And I grew up in the Washington, D.C. suburbs in punk rock, and like a deep criticism of capitalism and this really this economy that we live in that's so full of injustice and terrible things. And to shorten a long journey, through activism and through a lot of different pieces of work, when I came into the spiritual journey that I'm on, one of the things that I was seeing was that in the spiritual reality, the spiritual truth, in my experience, that love is everywhere, that divine is everywhere, that there's nowhere that it's not. But business is the place where we most ignore it, or don't see it, or don't acknowledge it. And I don't believe that healing in business is the only thing that's needed, but it's a huge part of what's needed. And so, I've been running Heart of Business now for, you said serial entrepreneur. I'm like, I've been in this business for a long time. It's been like going on 24 years. Yeah. And it's been really a tremendous journey, because of course I get to journey with other people's businesses within it. But I think that, there was like this elemental, something that just struck me in the very early days when I saw that there were certain kinds of healing that human beings can do, coming into oneness, coming into a realization of wholeness, living our full potential, expressing ourselves, and how that can, if we're conscious about it, echo certain business practices. And certain business practices, if they're missing that, we're probably, they may not be that effective. I mean, they may be effective at bringing in money, but they're not going to be effective at, as you so eloquently talk about, supporting each other and helping us all to thrive. Yeah. And that has been just a growing conviction. All of my activism and all of my love and all of my care for this world kind of landed in this place of like, okay, I think healing in business is really where I want to work. And I'll add one more thing in, is that it's not just business, but in particular, I have a very deep love of small business. And I grew up in small business. My grandfather had a store. My parents ran. My mom had started a few different small businesses as well. And there's a way that a small business is woven into its local community that it can
Yes.
contribute to, and it's also responsible to. That I don't know. It inspires me. It's something that I
Yeah.
think is really lovely because it speaks to this interrelatedness, this interdependence that I think is a reality. And I think that one of the big missteps in business, this is turning into a stump speech or something, but but it's
Oh,
like
good.
one of the big missteps in business, I think, is to think that it's independent of the
Yeah.
world around it, of the communities around it, and that it's somehow greater or bigger or more powerful than, because we're all dependent on everything, interdependent on everything around us.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were talking, I started, recalling some early years. My dad was a serial entrepreneur, and I remember, yeah, I mean, no, I will, there's about 8 different businesses that he started, most of them successful, and but I remember, yeah, he decided that he was going to start a pizza parlor. And then, Dad, you don't know how to make a pizza. You don't know how to cook. We'll just start with that. And he said, "I know, but this little, I think this will work. I think this will work." And there's this little community that he found in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, that the only pizza parlor around was I think it was about 25 miles from this little community. Yeah, and it was near Portland, but you had to go about 25 miles to get a pizza.
A long way to
And
go for a pizza.
long way to go for a pizza. So he found this little sweet spot, and he said, "No, okay, but I'm not just gonna sell pizza. What I want this to be is a, and this kind of goes to something that Howard Schultz talked about when he started Starbucks. I want Starbucks to be the third place." And that's how he actually grew Starbucks, as the third place. It's not home, it's not the office, it's his third place community. So Dad, and he ended up, being really successful with his place. Great pizzas, amazing pizzas. I mean, some of the best pizzas I've ever eaten. Like, how'd you do that? But he also was integrating himself in so many different ways into the community. Yeah, sponsoring, little league teams. I mean, there was just a lot of different things that he did to be the place in that community. That community, if you take a radius, included about 6 different little towns, but they
Mm.
all came to this pizza parlor. And the day he opened the door, he started. I mean, he literally started making money, and he never marketed anything. The marketing was
The
goodwill.
relationships,
It
right?
was the relationship.
That's
And
beautiful.
where I was going with that, when I talked about, yeah, every act of business can be an act of love. One of the things that you've got, I think, in the book here is a notion that the true role of marketing, yeah, what is the true role of marketing in a successful business, particularly a small to mid-sized business?
Right. Well, I mean, the true role of marketing is safety, is to create safety. And, when we think about uh, marketing, a lot of people think about marketing as attraction, like, oh, I'm going to
Mhm.
pull people in. And, for me, from a spiritual perspective, when we think about love, that's attraction. It's like
Yeah.
that's how we are pulled. And I'm not just talking about romantic love. I mean I love the woods that we live by, and I was out for a walk in them. I'm like, love pulls me to the woods. It's attraction. And when we try to manufacture attraction is when it feels gross. That's when
Yes.
things go weird.
Yep.
And so many of us have had our hearts broken in a variety of different ways, especially in this economy, especially the way some businesses, especially like the really large businesses, act. People don't feel safe. They're legitimately concerned and suspicious. And when we can think about our marketing as how can we bring safety to people instead of how can we pull them in,
I love
it
that
it
distinction.
changes our entire relationship to what we're doing. It changes our entire relationship. And a lot of the people that we work with, a lot of the clients we work with, um, have high levels of integrity, and they just won't do it if it doesn't feel good. And that's a lot of the times their business sputters along because they're avoiding things that which I encourage them to avoid. Like there's like a lot of really terrible examples of marketing out there. And I'm like, no, you're right to avoid that. Trust your heart on that. But let's learn a different way to go about marketing. Let's learn it from safety and love and care. Much like you were describing about your father, you can say that he wasn't marketing, but he was absolutely marketing, meaning that he was present in the market. He
Yep.
was going to market, and he went there and he met people and he connected with people. I mean, he didn't do the manufactured attraction marketing of like, come
No.
in and get a discount. And, it's like,
Yeah, he
oh,
never did a
and,
discount coupon. He none of that stuff ever showed up. And like when the first day he opened the doors, they were profitable. And
it's pizza, it's
pizza,
pizza. And it's
pizza,
like,
pizza.
it's, and it sounds like a lot of love and care. And
Yeah,
when you have love in the food and love in the building and love in the heart, it's like, it, it makes a difference. Like it makes a difference. I mean, it's one of the things that I get so tired of, and thank God it's starting to kind of fade out, is all these folks who, um, poo-poo the soft side of business. I
yeah,
mean, what are we doing in life if we're not attending to love? If we're not attending to the people around us?
yeah.
If we're not caring for things?
The idea of compassion comes into play here, and the regular listeners here know that I've written a book. I've written 5 books, but the one that I want to address here is Compassionate Capitalism. And for a lot of people, when they first hear that title, compassionate capitalism, it's almost an oxymoron. It's kind of, yeah. And they think, well, and they will, originally when I first published was, that's too soft. I mean, compassion. You're going to take, get taken advantage of. They're going to take you to the cleaner if you're compassionate. Compassion has an incredibly hard edge to it, and it requires an incredible amount of diligence and integrity to pull
Yes.
off. If you're going to be a compassionate capitalist, it's predicated on the fact that everything is connected.
Yes.
Now, everything is connected. So every decision I make has to be run through the filter of what's the connection impact, not just
Right.
first level, but second, third, fourth, fifth level out. And that's where, the idea of every act of business is an act of love comes into play here. Love as a verb, not as a noun. I love you. Are you loved? No, it's an action.
It's really, let's talk about this for a minute because, we had a situation recently where we have a very tiny team. We are a tiny business over here. We have a handful of people involved, and, that's it. And some of them are contractors. We're a client of theirs, like our web
Yeah.
guy, we're one of his clients. So it's, it's a tiny business. And we had this terrible week. It was a terrible week because um, uh, three of the people that were intimately involved in our operations, which is almost everybody, had a terrible bereavement of one sort or another. And the fourth person was moving house. It was just, you can laugh about it. It's like, it was so terrible. It's like you have to smile about it. And we had some deadlines, projects that we were trying to do. And I just said, you know what? Forget it. Like, we're pushing these deadlines back. Like, this is ridiculous. There's no reason. Like somebody was saying, oh, I'll get this done. And no, you're off work. You're not working. You just lost somebody you care about. You're done. Go away. Go to your family, like get away from the computer. And one of the things that I have discovered, because at first I was a terrible manager. You go back a couple times, like I didn't know what I was doing. It was terrible. It was
Both of
terrible.
my
I made
hands
so
are in
many.
the air on this one.
Oh my God, I made so many mistakes. So terrible. But at this point, what my main job is helping the people in my company to which are the priorities and what can be put aside, and encouraging them not to work too hard. Those are my two main tasks,
Hmm.
because they care so much that they'll overwork and go over their boundaries and not take time off,
Yeah.
unless if I don't tell them to stop. Now, this comes from compassion. It comes from this deep sense of caring. Like, I it's terrible to lose somebody. I mean, by the time, you've got some gray in your hair, you've lost people, right? It happens. And um and we have to, what are we in business for? We're
Hmm.
here to care for each other, and the compassion. And so I want to say that the the details tend to take care of themselves, not because of magic, but because when we care, that caring is multiplied. All the
Yes.
people in my company care. They care. They want to get it done. They want to see things do well. And I wouldn't even call it enlightened self-interest. I would just say that they care. They
Yeah.
care about what we're up to, and they care about their jobs. And I care about them, and they care about me. And that makes the business run really well,
It does.
really well.
Well, the idea of, for me, both gratitude, but also generosity kind of comes into the mix a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, my wife and I are playing with an notion right now. She's actually got the lead on this. She's writing a book around it called The Generosity Effect.
Mm.
And it's, the ripple that happens through an altruistic, generous, act of generosity. I wasn't generous because I wanted to reset. I give. I was generous, and it comes out of a mindset of abundance. It's an abundant universe, abundant with love, abundant with resource. It's an abundant uh, universe in which we live. And if I'm being generous, it has impact. It has ripple. I can be generous with sympathy, and it will have ripple to the business. And all of it tends to be very positive, in my experience. I mean, this is pretty much how we run our business as well. And it makes it's an again, I kind of go back to compassion has a hard edge to it. You have to be disciplined. You have to be willing to say, look, a deadline, that's an artificial number that got pulled out
Exactly.
of the air because we thought it was useful.
Right.
And if it's not useful in the current light of what we're dealing with right now, let's move the goalposts a little bit. No harm.
Right.
Nobody's birthday got taken away.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think, one of the things, I practice in the tradition of Sufism. I'm a Sufi teacher under my sheikh, who passed in 2015, but he was a teacher he was in Jerusalem, and a teacher at the Al-Aqsa Mosque there. And one of the things that I love about Sufism is that it looks at realities straight on. So it's like,
Yeah.
on one hand, we can say it's an abundant world. There's so much abundance. And at the same time, there are constrictions, there are restrictions,
Mhm.
there are limits. And a big part of like this deadline, there are limits. People lost, like we die. People die. You said that very emphatically in your TED talk. It's something that we focus on a lot in Sufism too. It's like life ends, we die. And there are limits. There are limits to the resources on this planet. There are limits to the time that we have. And how are we going to spend them? Are we going to spend them for love? Or are we
Mhm.
going to spend them in some way that causes harm? And so, in this case, exactly what you said, we chose to push the deadlines back. There are times where I've, like, clients come to us and they go, I want to do all this stuff. I'm saying, you can do almost anything, but you can't do everything.
Yes.
There are
Right. All at
choices to be
once.
made.
Yeah.
You know, there are limits. And when we choose priorities, this is a very profound thing, is that we recognize that prioritizing isn't just about letting go of the things that are unimportant and focusing on what's important, but it's also about letting go of things that are important and worthy of care that we just can't care for. It's just there's too much. There's 20 things in front of us, all of which are important and worthy of care, but I can only handle 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to choose. And that choosing does come out of compassion. It comes out of love. It comes out of a recognition of reality. And it allows us to be in a place of excellence, even when we're grieving what we're letting go.
And there will be grieving. There's, it's in my TED Talk, and I didn't mention this in the TED Talk necessarily, but the idea of, we only live once. I actually don't think that's an accurate aphorism. We only die once. So the question then becomes of how are we living? And
yes,
that, the whole memento mori, idea.
I love that. Yeah.
That is such a touchstone for me in terms of decisions I make. What's the consequence of this choice? For the sake of what? Is this important? And that question of for the sake of what, for me, it actually trumps Simon Sinek's why.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that, I think there's something very profound there, because I think that for many, if not most situations, the why is not something we really have access to.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have the, like, why are my kids the way they are? Why, like, what, like, there's so many whys that are beyond my comprehension and my ken, but for the sake of, like, what am I in service to? What am I in surrender to? What is my heart open to? What is the path that I'm walking? I think that is a much more useful, effective, and powerful question to ask. And I love that you named that, because because it orients us in a more grounded and more powerful way.
It is such a generative, in my experience, such a generative question. I mean, stuff will happen, and I can go to, this is awful. A health crisis is an example. And I go, why did that happen? Why me? I mean, all of those questions that don't really have an answer. And they end up being kind of a tumble, spin dry cycle here that there's no way out of. But if I can go to, this is happening for me in some way, shape, or form, for the sake of what? How do I actually use this?
Right.
I will die once, but how do I live? How do I use, very good friend of mine, Mary Morrissey, Brave Thinking Institute. Mary's just I love Mary Morrissey. Her and Bob Proctor both. But she says that, the content of your life is the curriculum of your soul. And I couldn't agree with that more. The content of my life is the curriculum for my soul, of my soul, and for my soul. And that's where we get to actually build ourselves, these stately mansions of, that's spoken of in scripture. Yeah. That has many rooms. Yeah. How do I actually build my life?
Right.
Now, there's not a question in there. I'm just kind of riffing.
No, I'm just, I think it's very beautiful. And I think that this is one of the challenges in our culture, is because, at least here in the United States, we don't, like, there haven't been a lot of choices made to create safety nets, to create like strong social support. Like, we're not spending our tax money caring for one another so well. Like, those aren't choices that we've been making. And so it puts small business owners in difficult situations where they want to be generous, but they're scared about survival. It's a totally normal thing. There's so much empathy, because it's like, I've got to make this work. And it takes a lot of trust, especially, it takes a lot of trust to kind of move forward with love. And when people have the discipline to do that, and they've learned something about business as well, and they're not just like, making it up. There are things that help when you learn them. What happens is that the relationships that you're growing along the way from that compassion and from that love are part of what holds you up. You start to create that network of care, that weaving, that network, that tapestry of support around your business, you know, and business is embedded in relationships.
Yeah.
And if you do the, slash and burn technique that so many people are fond of in business, you don't have that tapestry. You don't have access to those resources of friendship and care, and people willing to help you out when the time comes. You know,
Right.
like right now with the length of time I'm in business and the number of people that I know that I'm on good terms with, that I think highly of them and they think highly of me. If I have a program, all of those people are willing to share what I'm doing out of yes, they like what I do and they think what we do is high quality, but there's also goodwill there. I don't have to pay them for that.
Right.
I don't have to pay affiliate fees. We don't, it's like we have a lot of mutuality in how the business moves through the world. And I love to see our clients develop that as well, that sense of mutuality and support in their marketing, in their, within their companies. And it's like there's more security when you feel it, when you have it. There's more security that you can feel in those relationships than any number of zeros in your bank account.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's something that we can count on. All a business is at the end of the day is a collection of people in relationship. And if the relationships are working well, you got a pretty good shot at being successful in my experience. And that's I think a core tenet of the heart-centered business. So that, and again, folks, that's the name of his book, Heart-Centered Business, Healing from Toxic Business Culture so your small business can thrive. And there is a big difference between surviving as a business and thriving as a business. And that's where the spirit comes into play. Spirit loves to dance. Spirit is intended to thrive. Mark, where can folks find out more about what you're up to? Where can they get, I'm assuming, the regular places for the book, but
the book's available in all the regular places. You can get a free chapter if you come to our website, heartofbusiness.com. We have not just the free chapter, but there's also, like, if you go under free stuff, there's an assessment you can take, which helps to assess your business along the 4 stages of development, and you can see what's needed and what's not. And and you can just check us out and get to see if, hey, what they're offering resonance or not.
Perfect. And resonance. I love that term, resonance. Yeah. It just kind of connects. So folks who've been listening to Mark Silver, Mark, thank you so much for just a gracious interview. I love what you're up to, and any way that I can support, don't hesitate. You're making a big difference out there, truly. And heart-centered business, folks, check it out. Go to the website. He's got some goodies there. Feel free to avail yourself. The generosity effect is live and well, and just notice the ripple as you start playing with it. Okay, and until next time, just keep on keeping on. Find a way in your life on a daily basis to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. And I think you're going to find that keeping on works a whole lot better that way. Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much.
You bet.